Good day to all of you, and thank you for joining the Jesus Centered Life International Family Conference. I am Brother Dominic Aboy from the Order of Preachers, and I am here all the way from our formation house in Quezon City in the Philippines. I will give this short talk on how studying can in fact lead to our sanctification. But first and foremost, I would like to point out that I speak as a Dominican student brother, which means that I am currently in my formation for the priesthood. So please, I would ask for your prayers for me and my community so that we may be able to persevere in our vocation. As our name signifies, we are primarily students, student brothers. Since our main activity, well, at least that's what's expected of us, is to focus in our studies. And now, of course, I'm not actually insisting that engaging in study most surely and automatically makes one holy. No. This talk only aims to demonstrate how it can in fact be beneficial to our faith and how it facilitates our path towards holiness. Oh, and one more thing. I am far from suggesting that I am an exemplar of holiness and more so of studiousness. But I could say that as a student and as a Dominican friar, I am doing my best and struggling to be both. So, studiousness and sanctity. These words often fail to attract people, especially the youth in our age. For most of us, it is simply unbearable even to just think about study, boring and dry as it is, and even more to relate it with something as sober and bland as holiness. Only some of us really find pleasure in study, and even lesser have the endurance and discipline to pursue such an arduous task. Thus, we often regard the intellectual life as something too lofty or too elitist, reserved only for the ambitious and for the privileged people who have plenty of time to read and who have nothing else to do. Some of us even think that study is wasteful and pointless. Reading books doesn't make results, but busy hands and feet do. But in our world wherein there is a vast flow of information, all of which are claiming to be true, there is a greater need in our society and in our church for the deepening of the mind. As Christians, as smart Catholics, we are called to have an intelligent faith which does not get easily swept by the prevalent moods and trends of our time. Our mind is like a marketplace. Anything can enter it. As Thomas Aquinas puts it, the soul is in a sense all things. The discipline required in study is actually very simple. It lies solely on knowing what to admit. We must be attentive to the suggestions that enter the mind, choosing only what is important and necessary, and freeing ourselves from the frivolous thoughts and sinful preoccupations that we encounter. Especially in our age wherein technology tries its best to lure our attention and keep it distracted in non-essential things, we should be all the more cautious of the things that we get exposed to every day. We must treat the mind just like how we treat our stomach. Just as we do not eat garbage and fill ourselves with junk food, so we also avoid the toxic elements and evil thoughts from entering the mind, for it affects the state of our soul. Just like the marketplace, we only pick the goods that are actually beneficial and profitable to our soul and well-being. Aquinas, in discussing the virtue of studiousness, yes, studiousness is actually a virtue for Aquinas. He warns of two things. First is vain or uncontrolled curiosity, and the other is intellectual laziness. The latter often being a result of the former, since vain curiosity is usually inconsistent and short-lived. We use up all our energy on unnecessary things that we end up exhausted and incapable of doing nobler and more important things. And so the first thing that we should do in order to imbibe the virtue of studiousness is this. Begin by creating within ourselves a zone of silence, a spirit of recollection, and a will to renunciation and detachment, which puts us entirely at the disposal of our work. It is very difficult for us modern-day people to do this, especially for us Filipinos, who generally prefer to have loud conversations and to laugh boisterously. But the first step in deepening the mind is by narrowing the lip. He who cannot control his tongue cannot control his actions. According to Sertilange, silence is the hidden content of the words that count. What makes the worth of the soul is the abundance of what it does not express. In a world full of noise and chaos, study can make us holy by helping us to learn how to shut up and simplify things. But it is not just a way of shutting up for its own sake. We must be silent so that we can be more attentive and more docile to the message that God wants to impart to us. In such a way, we do not just study in order to learn, but to grow in virtue and to be formed. We study for our salvation. Study is not just informative, it must be also formative. Every Christian is called to be a student, a disciple, and this word actually is derived from the word discipline, disciplina. Every study should lead to our becoming better individuals, better citizens, better Christians. And it is our education and degrees doesn't actually determine how educated we are, but on how we treat other people, how we treat our brothers and sisters. That is why this is probably the most important thing that I would like you to remember in this talk. The humbler you are, the more intelligent you will become. And the more intelligent you become, the humbler you should be. Without virtue, our study is in vain. Without God as the final goal of our study, our learning is simply pointless. Study is but a prayer to truth. And this means that so long as we are serious and honest in our pursuit of truth, whether it be in the field of science, math, arts, philosophy, we can make this a means for us to know God, who is the source of all truth, and indeed, He is the truth Himself. Our determination to study and learn goes hand in hand, and with an even stronger resolution to be better Christians. I remember when I was in high school, my history teacher taught me a very important lesson. He wrongly checked my paper, and I pointed out that I was supposed to be wrong in an item. But to my surprise, he replied to me, "Do not change your grade. That is your prize for your honesty." Now, I do not even remember what was our lesson during that time, but it inculcated in me a greater truth. That learning is not just about the acquisition of information, but is actually for the building up of one's character. Now, one may ask, if study can really make you holy, then why are there intelligent people who are actually more vicious and even more condescending with the way they treat people? They have the tendency actually to be even more arrogant and to be a sort of a know-it-all. Well, study doesn't indeed guarantee that one will become holy. What it does is increase our freedom to respond to God's call, but it still respects and preserves our freedom to refuse it. Wrong intentions like ambition or vanity can impede the virtue found in studiousness. Arrogance, if we look closely, is actually a form of an ignorance about how little we know in the face of the infinite reality facing us. Being aware of how small and limited our capacity to understand the vast mysteries of the cosmos, the only thing that we can do is to be humbled. In the final analysis, it boils down to the end towards which our study is aimed, whether it is really directed towards the truth, towards learning more about our faith and about God, or whether it's just about showing off our knowledge or feeling superior over others. As we have mentioned earlier, most of us think of study as something too rigid and restricting. The word school has lost its original meaning, its original meaning actually signifies leisure. Our age often regard freedom as something that lets us do whatever we want. But Christian study, far from curtailing our freedom, actually maximizes it. And here lies two kinds of freedom. First is the freedom of the toddler who can just hit any keys in the piano. And the second kind of freedom is the freedom of the professional pianist who, out of discipline and determination, is able to bring out the most beautiful of music. And study doesn't only doesn't only free the mind, but it expands the heart and the mind. For the more we know, the more we love. Love is just a skin of knowledge if we think about it. The 13th century Dominican friar and Cardinal Hugh of St. Cher compared the virtue of study with a bow and arrow. The bow is bent in study, he said, and the arrow is released in preaching. In a like manner, the harder we pull our bow in study, the higher and deeper our arrow will pierce the heaven, but only if it is aimed at the right object. Study can make us holy by making us know more about God, the God whom we love. As we have mentioned, it expands the mind and heart, for we only love that which we know. It is true that the desire for study won't just come to us by divine infusion. Study is not just a passive reception of ideas, but it is an active process. And so the last point that I want to make in this talk is this. It would be helpful to find an hour or two to read books, but actually what is important is to fix one's gaze in an idea that really fascinates you, and that can encourage you to dig deeper and deeper in the mysteries of reality. Albert Einstein once wrote that everyone who is seriously involved in the pursuit of science becomes convinced that some spirit vastly superior than that of man is manifest in the universe. But as Christians, we know for a fact that all truths have no other origin than God. Studiousness can indeed be very demanding, of course. But it would be foolish to think that anything great can be achieved without exerting any effort. And as our faith is so precious that striving hard for it, even by means of study, wouldn't be asking too much. In the end, the only regret that we will have about our education is that we didn't get enough or more out of it. Now, one final word. It is true that study is not the be-all and end-all of getting holy. Other times it would be more profitable probably to learn from the book of nature, from one's experiences, than from just any other reading material. But it is a sure and helpful means for sanctification, especially in our age of uncertainty and moral relativism. In the end, the object and goal of our study must be none other than Jesus, the way, the truth, and the life. St. Thomas Aquinas, the patron saint of students, said, "I learned more from prayer than before the Blessed Sacrament than from all the books that I have studied." Indeed, the desire to learn must help us get rid of the non-essentials and lead us to the one thing that truly matters, our relationship with Jesus, who is the way, the truth, and the life. He is the only reason why we study, and He will be the one to help us to be more intelligent in dealing with the things that we face every day. Thank you very much for listening to this talk, and I hope that you learned something. And I would just like to request that you pray for me, and I assure you that we in the Dominican Student Date are praying for you always. God bless you, and thank you very much.